Good morning and welcome back to the Monday Study Group. We have been studying the Old Testament book called the Song of Songs or the Song of Solomon. And this morning in the in-person group, for the first time in about 4 years, we sang. We used to sing every Monday a hymn that had something to do with the passage we were studying or the season of the year that we were in. I think we did sing a couple songs at Christmas time this past year, but that, given COVID and other restrictions that we were observing, we did not sing anymore. But this morning we returned to our usual pattern of singing, and we sang Loved with Everlasting Love. I may have read this poem to you a couple of weeks ago as we began our study, but some of you know this hymn. I will sing the first and last stanzas and read the two intermediate stanzas so you can get a sense of how this 19th century hymn by George Wade Robinson, a congregational minister in England in the mid-19th century, how it reflects the Song of Solomon and to some degree is based on the Song of Solomon. So, loved with everlasting love. Loved with everlasting love, led by grace that love to know, Spirit breathing from above, Thou hast taught me it is so. Oh, this full and perfect peace, oh, this transport all divine, in a love which cannot cease, I am His and He is mine. His forever, only His, who the Lord and me shall part. Ah, with what a rest of bliss Christ can fill the loving heart. Heaven and earth may fade and flee, firstborn light in gloom decline, but while God and I shall be, I am His and He is mine. So an allegorical interpretation of the Song of Songs based on God's love for His people, Christ's love for the church. The intermediate stanzas 2 and 3 read this way. Heaven above is softer blue, earth around is sweeter green. Something lives in every hue Christless eyes have never seen. Birds with gladder songs o'erflow, flowers with deeper beauties shine, since I know, as now I know, I am His, and He is mine. Things that once were wild alarms cannot now disturb my rest, closed in everlasting arms, pillowed on the loving breast. Oh, to lie forever here, doubt and care and self resign, while He whispers in my ear, I am His and He is mine. George Wade Robinson. A hymn that I first came to know, as a member of InterVarsity Christian Fellowship at Wayne State University, probably in about 1961 or 62. Long time ago, huh? 42 years at least, right? 62 years. Let's make it 62 years. Yeah, right. Which would make me 81 as of the 1st of June, about 10 days ago. All right. Song of Solomon, chapter 3, verse 1 through chapter 5, verse 1. It starts with what many understand to be a dream or a vision, maybe a daydream of the woman lover seeking her male lover. She is on her bed at night and maybe half awake, maybe longing, dreaming, thinking about him. I sought him in my thinking, my imagination. I sought him whom my soul loves. I was thinking about him. I sought him, but I found him not. She thinks as she is lying there that she's going on a search for her beloved and he is not there. She can't find him. That is frustrating to her. She wants to be close to him. So she called to him, the end of verse 1, but there was no answer. I will rise now and go about the city. So in her imagination, I think it's imagined. I don't think she really got up and went about the city. Nothing in the poem requires that. Nothing actually also prohibits it. You can think that she got up in the middle of the night in some city, which we haven't had cities up to now, really. We've had rural areas, but she's now back in the village or in Jerusalem, possibly, since the daughters of Jerusalem have been present off and on. So in her imagination or her dream or her vision, she gets up and she goes about the city, in the streets and in the squares. She's looking everywhere. I will seek him whom my soul loves, but I sought him and found him not. So again, whether you think this is really happening in a narrative, or if you think this is a poem of what she imagined, as I do, that she is not able to find her lover, as even though she is diligently seeking for him. The city guardians, the sentinels, who are the watchmen of the city at night, found her as she was wandering about alone in the city, at least in her dream, if not in reality. And they say nothing, though she says to them, "Have you seen him whom my soul loves?" Now, realistically, would they know who that was? This tall, dark, and handsome guy that it's not enough of a description, is it? Him whom my soul loves. So again, I think this argues for this being her imagination. But they don't answer her. She inquires about them, about him, of them, but no answer. And scarcely in her thought or imagination or in reality, she passes them, and as soon as she passed them, she found him. What is he doing out in the middle of the night? Maybe he's looking for her also. We don't know that. But he apparently is out there in the middle of the night in the city, and she finds him, and she held him and would not let him go in her imagination, in her vision, until she had imagined him coming with her to her own mother's house, the only house that she knows, the only house she can visualize. She has no home of her own. So when she wants to bring her lover home, she has to bring him to the only house that she knows, the one she grew up in, the one, in fact, into the room where she herself was conceived. And so it adds that element of sexuality to the imagined vision. Or actually, if you think it narrates a real event, she actually brought him into her mother's house and into her mother's bedroom. Then abruptly, that dream or vision stops, and she again appeals to the daughters of Jerusalem. She appeals to them by the gazelles and the wild doves, not by Yahweh, not swearing by Yahweh, but adjuring them, asking them to swear by the wild animals, not to stir up or awaken love until it is ready. And we've talked about the possibilities of what that could mean. The last time we saw that was in chapter 2, verse 7. The same words are said to the daughters of Jerusalem. And I think that is the only other time that the daughters of Jerusalem are warned. We hear about them in chapter 1, but they weren't warned in chapter 1 like they are in 2:7 of chapter 2, and then here in 3:5. So what comes next? A different poem, something completely unrelated, well, almost unrelated to what we've just read about her vision of seeking and finding her lover. What comes next in verses 6 through 11 is a poem about Solomon and his coming up from the wilderness with an entourage that is causing a column of smoke, as it were, or dust to rise up from the desert as more than 60 men march along the litter, the sedan chair, perhaps, of the imagined King Solomon coming up from the desert. Again, you've got a choice here of whether you want to read this as a literal happening, that one day someone observed, and we don't know for sure who is doing the observing here. It's simply a poem about Solomon coming up from the wilderness with a large entourage accompanying his litter or palanquin or sedan chair or carriage. Any of those words would adequately translate the Hebrew here. So you can use your imagination to imagine the entourage of King Solomon with mighty men of Israel equipped with swords by their sides on a device of some kind made of the wood of Lebanon, of cedar, posts of silver, back of gold, seat of purple, its interior lovingly laid or inlaid with love. The Hebrew is uncertain. And in the light of that, it seems as if the woman, who is the only one so far who has called on the daughters of Jerusalem, the woman calls out to them again, "O daughters of Jerusalem, come and see, look, O daughters of Zion, at King Solomon, at the crown with which his mother crowned him on the day of his wedding, on the day of the gladness of his heart." So there's a vision here of Solomon coming up from the wilderness. Is it the young woman's dream as she thinks about her idealized lover as King Solomon? Or is it actually King Solomon? The oldest interpretation of this book is that we should take all this literally, and that this is a literal version of the lover who is King Solomon coming to the woman wherever she is. It's a bit complicated because later on, we're going to see in chapter 4, she is in Lebanon, apparently, unless that's symbolic. But here we have a wedding vision of Solomon. I'm taking it as symbolic, perhaps another dream or vision of the young woman who idealizes her male lover as King Solomon coming to her on his wedding day, and she imagines how he is arrayed and accompanied by a great entourage. It's unusual in that there's no other poem like this celebrating King Solomon in this set of poetry, and it's part of the reason why it got to be called the Song of Solomon. We move on then to chapter 4. In chapter 4, we have the only extended speech by the male lover in the whole book. There are other short speeches of a verse or two by the male lover, but here we have an extended, almost chapter long speech by the male lover giving in detail a description of the woman's physicality, of her body, from head through chest. And you have read this and know how detailed it is, and that it uses similes and metaphors to describe her. You might think, although there's no indication that he is dreaming here, you might think that this is his dream that corresponds to her dream in chapter 3. One of the members of the Monday study group today, I think, insightfully pointed out that this is like a love letter that the male sends to the female in describing her. Is she really present to him in reality? That is, if we had had a video camera, would we have been able to record him giving this speech to her? Well, it's not impossible, but to me it seems much more likely that this is a vision of her, an imagined, not a dream so much as an imagined picture of her. You can do this yourself, right? You can think about somebody you know. Doesn't have to be a lover. You can think about somebody you know, and in your mind, you could describe them. And if you were poetic or romantic or creative enough, you could use metaphors and similes to describe their hair, their face, their eyes, their smile, their neck, their chest, their whole body, their arms, their legs. You could describe the person using a variety of creative metaphors. I think that's what's going on here. This is a kind of love letter or poetic, written down imagination that the young man has of his young woman lover. He describes her eyes, her hair, her teeth, which are perfect. They are white, whereas often people's teeth were yellowed or black because they didn't get enough nutrition in their youth. All of her teeth are in place. Each one has a corresponding other, and they are beautiful. Her cheeks are like halves of a pomegranate. Her lips are like a crimson thread. Her neck is like the Tower of David. It apparently is beautiful. Maybe it's made of alabaster or white stone or brown stone. It's built in courses. I have no idea what that means in verse 4, but it is a tall enough neck, a long enough neck that it has a large, almost chainmail-like necklace with individual sparkling metallic or jewel-like pieces all together as a part of her necklace. And they shine. He's going to say later that he's caught a glint from one of these sparkling pieces. Your neck is, and on it hangs 1,000 shields or bucklers, all of them shields of warriors, as it were. Her breasts are like 2 fawns, twins of a gazelle that feed among the lilies. And then the description stops there, and he says, until the day breathes. I take it to mean that the day begins or dawns. Breathing is a sign of life, and the shadows of night flee. This is verse 6. Until that happens, I will hasten to the mountain of myrrh and the hill of frankincense. Is that also herself, her body? Does he say that he is coming to where she is, or is this a different place? Rhetorical question. We don't know for sure. But he has been talking about her, so maybe it is a reference to her. And he continues to say, "You are altogether beautiful, my love. There is no flaw in you." And then, rather, I think unusually, though in its original context, when it was originally written and sung, everyone who heard it knew what the writer meant, even if we today don't. He calls on her in chapter 4, verse 8, to come with him from Lebanon, my bride. Now that's in the far north of Israel. Come with me from Lebanon. Is she a Lebanese woman? Is she from Lebanon? That's where her mother's house is. Or is Lebanon, which some commentators think, a symbol for her inaccessibility, that she is, as it were, far away, inaccessible, foreign, not immediately available to the man? He calls on her to depart from the peaks of the north, from Amana, from Senir, from Hermon, from the dens of lions and the mountains of leopards. One of our members of the Monday study group is a natural scientist, and he knew that the last mountain leopard disappeared from Lebanon, from the mountains between Lebanon and Israel. The last mountain leopard disappeared in the 1970s in a fight with a Bedouin shepherd who was protecting his flock. And he killed the last known mountain leopard in that region of the Middle East. Apparently, there are still some mountain lions in the area. Well, why do we have lions and leopards mentioned? These are symbols of danger. She is inaccessible to him. She's from the far north. It's too dangerous, maybe, or at least, if not too dangerous, it would be dangerous to go and get her. So she is called to come from where she is in the north to come to him. It's hard to know exactly how this 8th verse functions in the overall understanding of the poem, but it is, I think, a little unusual that she is not in Israel, even though she calls out to the daughters of Jerusalem. How does that work? Well, these geographic references sometimes are symbolic. He continues in verse 9, "You have ravished my heart, my sister, my bride. You have ravished my heart with a glance of your eyes, with one jewel of your necklace that is caught the light of the sun and is twinkling." She has caught his eye. She has caught his heart. He thinks how sweet she is, that her love is better than wine. And then we get further descriptions that are oriented toward fragrance. Your oils are more fragrant than any spice. Your lips distill nectar. Honey and milk are under your tongue. The scent of your garments is like the scent of the cedar trees of Lebanon. You know the smell of cedar in a cedar chest, for example, or just with a cedar tree. She is described as a garden. This is a metaphor, not a simile. He says she is a garden locked, a fountain sealed, probably a reference to her virginity. She is, her plants or channel is an orchard of pomegranates with choicest fruits, henna, nard and saffron, calamus and cinnamon, trees of frankincense, myrrh and aloes, with all chief spices. We're supposed to be engaging in a romantic aroma of her scent and her fragrance, which draws him to her in detail as he describes her as a scented garden, a garden fountain, a well of living water with flowing streams from Lebanon. There's Lebanon again. But she is described as a garden that is awaiting his entrance. So then in verse 16, she answers his poem, his vision. Again, in reality, video camera, she would be there, she'd answer him. That's certainly possible. Or is this his imagining of her answer to his romantic poetry? She says, "Awake, O north wind, and come, O south wind. Let all the winds come and blow upon my garden, myself, that my fragrance may be wafted abroad. And so let my lover catch my scent. Let my beloved come to his garden so that he can sense where I am and come and enter in and eat the fruits of my garden." And he responds in chapter 5, verse 1, "I have come to my garden." Your translation may just say, "I come," but the Hebrew verbs here are perfect tense. They describe something accomplished and continuing. I have come to my garden, my sister, my bride. I have gathered my myrrh with my spice. I have eaten my honeycomb with spice and with honey. I have drunk my wine with my milk. In other words, what she has offered him, he has partaken of. And so the chorus says in chapter 5, verse 1, at the end of this passage, someone else speaks about and to the lovers. Someone else, perhaps the daughters of Jerusalem, or the narrator himself or herself. This book, again, could have been written by a woman, since a woman is the main speaker. But this third party says to the male and female lovers, "Eat and drink, friends, be drunk with love." 5:1 is the middle line of the whole poem. Now, this is not, as far as we know, the Song of Solomon, a chiasm, a figure in literature where there's a kind of X drawn through the poem, so that what is first also shows up again at the end, and what is second shows up second to the last, and where they cross in the middle, that's the most important thing. But this is the middle verse, and it does seem to be the verse of the consummation of their intimacy, of their love, when the outside party says to them, after he has said, "I have entered into my garden," the outside party encourages them to enjoy the experience of love, to eat and drink and to feast in love. So a very erotic poem, a very sensual poem, from beginning to end, with lots of symbols. In Thomas Gledhill's commentary on the Song of Solomon, in the Bible Speaks Today series, a very good commentator, he has long comments on the goodness of human sexuality, the God-givenness of human sexuality, and how the church came to have a negative view of human sexuality. And he has long sections on sex as a sacrament, on St. Augustine as the origin of much of the negative thinking in Christianity about human sexuality, given Augustine's view that original sin was involved with human sexuality, and that original sin is biologically transmitted through the sexual act. That's in Augustine, and it came to be fixed doctrine in the Church of the Middle Ages. that whole way of looking at human sexuality is being rethought over the last couple of hundred years in terms of the God-givenness of human sexuality, a part of the goodness of creation when God saw all that God had made and called it very good. Well, we'll leave you to sort out that difficult problem. We ended the Monday study group telling everybody to go home and take a cold shower. So that's where our study ends today, and we'll pick up and do the rest of chapter 5 and all of chapter 6 for next week. That means that the following week, in 2 weeks, chapters 7 and 8 will end our study of the Song of Solomon, and we will go on to whatever the group decides to do next. Last time we voted on what to do next, the group wanted to do the Didache, a late first century Christian doctrine or teaching. It's more of a teaching, which is what the word Didache means in Greek. And to follow that, it's not long, and to follow it by the letters of the Bishop of Antioch, Ignatius, who was on his way to martyrdom in Rome. And while he was on his way to martyrdom, he wrote letters to the 7 churches, I think it's 7, that he was responsible for or had a close relationship with, and gives them advice about his martyrdom and about their lives as Christians in the persecutions of the Roman Empire in the late 1st and early 2nd century. We may or may not do that. That's the proposal. All right. Thank you again for being part of this study. I hope you're enjoying it. I hope you're able to find a decent commentary to help work on the symbolism and meaning of the Song of Solomon. Take care.